After protesters stormed the Capitol, the new race for the White House begins in Iowa as Republican candidates once again battle Trump for the nomination. Stay with Al Jazeera for the U.S. election 2024.
In Mexico's border cities, the stark impact of drug trafficking unfolds. On one side, the world's largest consumer of narcotics. On the other, lives being sacrificed to meet the demand. Under-resourced and under pressure, a forensic investigator and her team piece together evidence as they grapple with the relentless cycle of homicides. Blood on Our Side. A witness documentary on Al Jazeera.
Religious trinkets and souvenirs line the centuries-old cobbled lanes. Tourism is the bread and butter of Jerusalem-like families, but the war and flight cancellations have meant that tourists aren't coming.
We are next to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, a very good location for the tourists. A historical, biblical, religious place. We are the famous place for the Christian, for the pilgrimage to come to visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. No tourists, it's empty, dead.
This should be the busiest time of the year with Christmas and New Year around the corner, and usually these lanes and these shops are incredibly busy with tourists from all around the world. But if you speak to any of the shop owners, they'll tell you that business has all but dwindled. Large-scale Israeli police surveillance and arbitrary arrests have also been stepped up in occupied East Jerusalem, with movement being restricted, and it's already having repercussions on the local economy.
I've been covering all of Latin America for most of my career, but no country is alike, and it's my job to shed light on how and why.
Israeli strikes across the Gaza Strip kill 147 Palestinians as the army claims to be scaling down its military operation. Hello, I'm Sahil Rahman. You're watching Al Jazeera live from my headquarters here in Doha. Coming up. Protests in the occupied West Bank as the US Secretary of State meets Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas. The US and UK say they've repelled a large attack in the Red Sea by Houthis in Yemen. And in other news, gunmen in Ecuador storm a TV station and disrupt a live broadcast. Rising gang violence forces the government to impose a state of emergency. Welcome to the programme. 147 Palestinians have been killed in a series of Israeli strikes targeting many areas in Gaza in the last 24 hours. Now, the attacks were launched as the Israeli army claims to be scaling down its military operation. But as Hashim Albro reports, there's no sign of that for those on the ground.
This is where families in Rafah come every day looking for their loved ones. The corpses of the dead have been mutilated by Israel's bombardment. The names written on the white sheets are the only way to identify the victims. Abu Abd was one of the first people to rush to join efforts to retrieve people trapped under the wreckage. He says at least 100 displaced civilians were seeking shelter in a building when it came tumbling down at night following relentless Israeli airstrikes.
What was their crime? Tell me, were they carrying weapons? Shame on all those who abandoned and betrayed us. Shame on those who are silent witnesses. Shame on Arab leaders. Tell me what these children and women did wrong to end up as body parts.
This is life in Gaza. Bereaved families saying farewell to their loved ones. With continuous Israeli attacks, leaving nowhere safe in Gaza, funeral ceremonies are kept short and bodies are rushed to cemeteries. The death toll among civilians is on the rise. Most of them are women and children. Despite international condemnation, Israel insists it will continue the war until Hamas is defeated.
We are not murderers or terrorists. If they exterminate Gaza and the resistance, God will sprout in this land. And we say that Gaza is the graveyard of the invaders.
No one here believes this war is anywhere near ending. The death and destruction in Gaza are unprecedented, and for these people, it's too painful to bear. Hashim Al-Bara, Al Jazeera.
Hani Mahmoud joins us now from Rafah in southern Gaza. And Hani, in the last couple of hours, you were telling us about sort of the issues for power generation facilities for very important installations like hospitals and medical facilities. They're either on fire or they're out of action because of the Israeli bombing over the last 24 hours.
Yes, indeed. Further destruction to all means of life, and this time what was targeted was the power generation plant in the central area of the Gaza Strip, particularly in Al Bureij area. This plant houses 4 major power generators. One of them was functioning before the war started on Gaza, but right now, because of the intensity of the bombardment and the airstrikes and the heavy artillery shelling, this plant just caught on fire, just severely damaging all 4 power generators, including all the physical structures around it. Something that will cause further suffering for Palestinians when this war come to an end, because there won't be any power generators left for them to get electricity, and that's the problem. Already this plant was working at the lowest capacity possible in one generator. It's just further increasing the misery and the unbearable living conditions across the Gaza Strip.
And of course, Hani, you were at a field hospital earlier in the day, and there was an incident very close to you that really brings home the reality of what Gazans are having to cope with on a day-to-day basis.
Right, it's just becoming increasingly difficult for 1.5 million displaced Palestinians in Rafah to survive these unbearable conditions. And this time happened to be a hospital, just an indication and a reminder there is nothing safe here and no place to go to seek shelter, even if it's a hospital, a field hospital operated and managed by a charitable organization, an international one, the International Medical Corps here in Gaza. But it's nothing is saving people from, nothing protecting people from the unpredictable falling bombs. And it's a reminder, even a hospital is not safe. Just across the street from the main gate of the hospital, a building was targeted that houses the power generator that supplies the hospital with electricity. Just make people there wonder with their growing concern that this place not even safe for them to come and seek medical help in it.
Hani Mahmoud there for us in Rafah. Thanks very much for the update, and we'll join Hani through the day. Well, intensifying Israeli attacks on the Al-Aqsa hospital in central Gaza are forcing medical staff to evacuate. Its maternity and intensive care units have also been attacked. Thousands of people taking shelter in the facility have been ordered to leave. Hind Al-Qadri is at the hospital in Deir al-Balah.
We are in Al-Aqsa Hospital in Deir al-Balah, where most of the medical team evacuated after the quadcopter fired live ammunition on the ICU unit and the maternity unit in the Gaza Strip. Let's walk inside. As you see, the only medical personnel left are the nursing team, where most of them are volunteers and live in the middle area and do not have any place to evacuate. We have been talking to the nursing team, and they're telling us that they are going to stay here because they feel that it is a huge responsibility for them to leave the hospital. They also told us that the main doctors are evacuated with their families because their families were inside this hospital. Also, the administrative team is completely empty, where the doctors left in the hospital are doing both the administrative work and the medical work. Here, there are still also volunteers for cleaning the hospital, and 2 days ago, some journalists who were here in the hospital helped and made an initiative helping the hospital to clean its floors and its emergency departments. More than 90% of the medical team in the Al-Aqsa hospital evacuated after MSF also evacuated the hospitals. And it's not only doctors who evacuated, but also journalists, where we're talking about more than 10 media organizations left and evacuated southern to Khan Yunis and to Rafah. We're also talking about people who were seeking refuge in the hospital for more than 3 months in Deir al-Balah. The hospital is not witnessing a collapse, but it has been also witnessing a severe shortage of medical use, according to the medical team in this hospital. This is Hind Al-Khudri for Al Jazeera, Gaza, Palestine.
Now, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas in Ramallah as part of his ongoing diplomatic tour of the region. The two discussed the future of Gaza as part of Washington's post-war plans, which include steps towards a Palestinian state. But Blinken's presence drew protests in Ramallah, with many carrying banners opposing the visit. Now, they accused the US of complicity against what they called Israeli genocide in Gaza. Let's get more on this from Mohammed Jamjoon, our correspondent, who joins us now from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. And so the US Secretary of State met the Palestinian president. Did anything tangible come out of that meeting, Mohammed?
So, Hale, if there were any concrete developments that were either agreed to, that has not been released as of yet. What we've gotten so far are very few details. We've heard from Palestinian authorities that efforts to try to end hostilities in Gaza, that they were discussed, that efforts to try to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza were discussed. Not a lot beyond that. That's quite frankly what we were expecting. Most people we spoke with today had said they did not think that too much was going to be accomplished, particularly in this meeting, which is interesting because yesterday you had Secretary Blinken, after his meetings with various Israeli officials, including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying how important it was for there to be a pathway for the creation of a Palestinian state, saying that Israeli leaders needed to make it less difficult for Palestinians to govern themselves, also saying that he was going to be carrying a message here today that the Palestinian Authority needed to start doing self-reforms. So there was a lot going into the meeting, but as of yet, we've not heard about any tangible solutions that may have been arrived at. Now, thus far, what we know is that shortly after the meeting, the Palestinian president, Abbas, left Ramallah, that he has now arrived in Aqaba in Jordan. He is to have a tripartite summit with the Jordanian King Abdullah and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi at some point later today. It's expected that in that meeting they're going to be discussing efforts to try to end the war in Gaza as well.
And of course, while that meeting was going on, Mohammed, it's pretty obvious that people were angry that Blinken was even in the area, when really what people want to see and hear is a reduction of violence by the Israelis and a ceasefire in Gaza, and they're just not getting it.
That's right, Sohail. We saw a protest here where there weren't that many demonstrators, only a few dozen, but they were very angry with the fact not only that Antony Blinken was coming here, but also with the fact that President Abbas would be meeting with him. You had many of the demonstrators that were out in the streets accusing the U.S. of facilitating and committing genocide in Gaza. They want to see America leaving the region. They want to see America putting pressure on Israel to end the hostilities in Gaza. And they say none of that has occurred. When we've spoken to Palestinian officials here in the last few days, they've said that first and foremost, what they want to see before any discussion can be had about any day after the war scenarios in Gaza, they need to see an end to the aggression in Gaza. And everybody that we spoke with who was out here today, and again, it was not a large crowd by any measure, they said that that has not happened and that they had no faith that anything was going to be discussed in that meeting today with Abbas that would lead to a cessation of hostilities. Also, one of the big challenges for the Palestinian Authority is the fact that there is so little faith among the public here when it comes to the leadership. You had a recent poll, it was taken in December, which indicated that 2/3 of Palestinians are opposed to the PA even participating